Up next is Sofija Stefanovic, and between the three of us, we have 3 young babies. So we decided to experiment by recording her interview remotely. This is the one interview in our first season that wasn't recorded in our studio. You might be able to tell that one of us called in from our basement, and you may even hear a baby in the background. Here's our conversation with Sofija.
Welcome to I'm Still Here, a podcast on making art after kids. I'm Mary Atkins.
And I'm Kate Tellers, and we're parents who are also people who make art.
What do we mean by art, Kate?
Creative stuff. Today is a great day. Hi, Mary. How are you?
I'm great. Glad to be here.
I'm happy to be here, and we have an amazing guest with us today. We have the storyteller and author, Sofija Stefanovic. Hi, Sofija. How are you?
Hi, Kate. I'm well, thank you.
We're so happy to have you here, fresh off a trip to Indonesia.
Mm-hmm. Well, I went for a writers' festival, and I had a book come out at the beginning of this year. My book came out in April, and I had a baby a couple of months before that, so in December. So this was a writers' festival that I got invited to for the book, and it was my first time away from the baby, and it was a really really major time away from the baby because it was like basically as far away as you can get from New York to in Bali.
And how long were you there?
I was there for a week, and during that time, my son started walking as if to punish me. He started walking like when I got on the plane on my first leg of the trip. And for the first, I got there and I thought, I was like a little bit tearful. I landed basically and got a video of him walking, and I thought, how long have I been gone? Like it was, you're always kind of woozy after traveling 25 hours or something anyway. So I felt really kind of emotional and shaky and strange. And then I got to this hotel with this beautiful, like, big bed just for me, and no babies anywhere, and a minibar. And I just went to sleep for about 11 hours, and I woke up and I felt so much better. It was like the longest sleep I've had since my son was born. And then the rest of the week was excellent, actually.
So did you intentionally not travel? Because you traveled after he was born, but just not without him, right?
Yeah. Well, this was like, it's a 12-hour time difference, and it's 25 hours to get there. So it would have been just torturous, I think, for everyone. Mm-hmm. And he's 10 months old. So, he's pretty independent now. I feel like I can leave him to his own devices.
I was in Lisbon last week, which is not quite as far, but is far. And I had such adrenaline getting off. Well, I flew on election night. So I left and I didn't know the future of our country. And then I landed and was like getting 100 texts about everything. And I got into my Airbnb and I texted my colleague and I was like, oh, I don't even know what to do. What? And she was like, sleep, Kate, like you need to sleep. And I, for some reason, didn't want to. I think because I was like the opposite. I was so excited that I was on my own and kind of pumped up about everything. And then I laid in my bed and it was like the best sleep you'll ever have in your life. Yeah. Is like a jet lagged sleep without a child waking you up.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
It's so refreshing, isn't it?
2 nights ago, we went to a wedding for the night out of town, and my mom watched our son, who is 7 months old. And I told everyone we rode with other parents, and I told everyone, like, none of us are going to sleep because we're so used to getting up. Our bodies are just going to wake up in the middle of the night. And then I slept like a rock for like 10 hours. And my husband, we woke up and he said, I haven't felt this good in 15 years. Like, we were so happy.
Yeah, it's rejuvenating as well. Like, people say, like, oh, when you have a little kid, you're so confused all the time and, it's so hard to get work done. It's like, yeah, because you're sort of working under torturous conditions where you're being woken up from like REM sleep all the time and screamed at. And yeah, it's a big deal getting a good night's sleep.
Sofija, what do you make and how did you get into it?
So I'm a writer and I'm also a storyteller. I've been into it for most of my life. I've done journalism and investigative journalism, and I used to make documentary films as well. But since I moved to New York about 4 years ago, I have been writing a memoir, and the memoir just came out this year.
What's it called?
And it's called Miss Ex-Yugoslavia. And it's about me growing up as an immigrant kid in Australia while Yugoslavia falls apart. So my family came from Yugoslavia when I was a little kid, and we moved to Australia. And then basically my life has always been me as a fish out of water trying to fit in and generally failing. And I started talking more. I used to work as a writer, and I did journalism, and I worked for TV as well. But I only started telling more of my story when I moved to New York, and when I started telling stories with The Moth. And I think it was that I went to one of their story slams, and I noticed how people just get up and tell a story and don't feel embarrassed. I think if I'd been in Australia, I would have been embarrassed, and I would have thought, what if someone I know is in the audience? But I didn't know anyone in New York. And also people in New York seem just generally unembarrassed about everything. So I just felt this like surge of confidence. And so I got on stage and I told a story, and I did it a couple of times in the story slams. And then they were really well received, and people were so nice about it that I thought, okay, so these, Americans are interested in stories about me as an immigrant Yugoslavian kid living in Australia, which is kind of unexpected, or I didn't think people would be that interested in it. But it turned out that they were, which was really, really lovely. And that gave me a confidence boost. And then I started writing the memoir, which has just come out. So that came out kind of around about the same time as my baby. So my baby was December, and then my book was April.
Wow.
Yeah, so it all happened at the same time. I don't really recommend having a book and a baby at the same time. But
was it your first baby and your first book?
Yeah, it was definitely my first baby. And with the book, I'd written a sort of shorter one in Australia before, but it was my first sort of full-length big book.
And who is your baby?
My baby is Leon, and he's 11 months old, and he's pretty cute. Yeah, I spend a lot of time with him, so luckily we get along.
Sofija, what made you come from Australia to the US?
It was actually my partner's idea. My partner, Michael, is a software guy, and there are plenty, there's a lot of work in New York for people who are in the tech industry. So he really liked New York, and he thought it would be a fun place to go and kind of try it out. And for me, I was like, why would I go to New York? It's just full of writers. That sounds like the worst idea. It's, like going to Hollywood to be an actor or something. It just sounded like they're probably not looking for more writers. But he said, well, let's just try it out and see what happens. And then we came here, and it turned out to actually be a really great place for me. I've loved it career-wise. I also host literary events. So I used to do an event called Women of Letters, which went for about 4 years, which was an all-female literary salon. And now I host a show called This Alien Nation, which is about immigration. It's a celebration of immigration. So, and that's kind of what I'm into. Immigration is what I write about, and my kind of field of interest. So being in New York is amazing because each month I get people from different immigrant backgrounds to come and tell a story or read a piece that they've written. It's pretty loose. They also play music, but they perform something. And the only theme that they keep in mind is the theme of immigration. And it's at this beautiful venue, I think like one of the best venues in New York, Joe's Pub at the Public Theatre, and I get to do that. So I feel like New York has turned out to be an amazing place for me. It certainly was until I had a baby. Now I'm trying to kind of reassess it through my new eyes, where I look for, you know, like I like to be able to push a stroller across the street, which is sometimes impossible in the neighborhood where I live. So yeah, things have changed slightly.
Yeah. So it's crazy because like your 4 years in New York, you have grown like a pretty substantial career. You know, you wrote an entire book, you've started now 2 live event series, and you've had a baby. So in the, I mean, I guess one like hat tip to you for being able to sort of jump in and find your footing so quickly in New York.
Seriously, that's amazing.
Yeah, totally. Like my kid is almost 4, and I feel like I'm patting myself on the back for like sustaining one human life for 4 years, let alone like all of the other things.
The year since he was born has been different to the years before. I can say that much.
But so like what has been different? Like what are the challenges that you find pre and post baby?
Well, now that I have a baby, I keep thinking like, what did I do with all that time? Like, I have all these regrets. I'm like, how dare you have wasted so much time? It just seems like I could have done so much more. I'm thinking now, like you say, you know, 4 years it's many achievements, but I think like I should have written 4 books in that time, because now there's like everything takes me, I'd say maybe 4 times as long now that I have him, and it's really nice, and I am at home with him most of the time. So I work, and I always have worked as a freelancer. So now I'm kind of managing to do that with Leon around, or trying to manage that, but it just means that I have to say no to a lot more things. It means that I'm finding little hacks, like I take him to the Y. There's a Y near me, and they have $5 childcare. So, but you can't leave the building. So you can leave him in childcare. You don't have to go to the gym or the pool, but you sit in this lobby. So there's me and there's this dad who's a cartoonist, and I I started copying him because I realized I was leaving the baby and going to the gym because I thought I've always been, you know, like by the rules. So it's like, this is what you go to the Y for. And then I noticed this guy, and he's clearly not there for the gym. He's just like dressed in non-gym clothes, and he sets up in the lobby with all these like drawing materials and stuff. And his kid is in childcare for like 4 hours. And then I was like, okay, he's onto something. He's clearly working every day as a freelancer. And then I found I went to a writers' festival in Michigan, and I met this other also man actually who had written his entire first book at the Y while his kid was in the childcare. So I'm finding little solutions like that, and I'm less shy to take them. You know, I think before I would have been a bit more embarrassed about taking my son to the Y every single day so that I can sit and send emails. But I do it now. So I'm finding little, solutions.
So you go to the Y, you drop Leon off, you go to the lobby, and you just get some writing
And by
done.
the way, the lobby, let me just paint a picture for you. It is not, there's no food, there's no drinks. There's lots and lots of people bringing kids, because there's also, like proper like kindergarten and stuff there. So there's like nannies with strollers, there's people yelling over each other, and then there's me and the cartoonist dad kind of sitting there guiltily with our laptops and just kind of, using the system to our advantage.
Is there anyone you have to avoid making eye contact with while you do that? I'm just picturing
no,
like
they
a
know.
clerk
Look,
or
they
something
know,
at
and
the
they
front
say
desk.
things like, you can't leave. Like they've said that to me a couple of times. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to, because it would be good if I could leave, because I could go and, I don't know, get lunch or something. But you can't leave, and they're pretty tolerant. I think that he, what's it called when someone, I think he paved the way, the dad, the cartoonist dad.
Yeah.
And I actually wonder I wonder if this is something that men have less of a hard time doing, but it's the same. So my partner takes the baby to work as well once a week because it's a baby-friendly workplace. But I wonder if it was a woman, whether she would take advantage of that and just take her kid. I don't know.
Yeah, it is. There is something that I found with parenting where it's forced me to take up space in a way that I hadn't before. Like you just have to, like you have to advocate for yourself. You are sort of an annoying person in some spaces because you're bringing in a huge stroller or, you know, like suddenly you need to finish a meal faster. You have to finish meals more quickly in a restaurant or something like that. Like you just have to be comfortable with that dissonance. So I wonder if that's something. Yeah, I think as women, we're taught to not do that, to not take up space in a way that I think a lot of men are perhaps it's not quite as disciplined out of them, maybe. Like I love that cartoonist. I love that the people are like, don't leave.
And he brings he brings his own drinks and stuff along. Like he always has a Snapple and he has a whole thing worked out. So I like it that I like it that he's pushed for that. And that now people like me can go in there and do their little projects as well.
It feels like it should be in what's the front section of the New Yorker where they do like the short columns.
Oh yeah.
About
Shouts and Murmurs.
No, not
Shouts and Murmurs. Talk of the Town.
Talk of the Town. I feel like you've got a Talk of the Town brewing there.
That's true. But I also don't want to give away the secret. I mean, obviously, I've given it away to you now and your listeners.
And to our millions of listeners, yeah.
I have thought about doing this. And I feel like there are probably many people who have. I'm just so impressed that you and the cartoonist dad actually do it. But what stopped you
from doing it?
Because I go to a gym where there's also childcare for a flat $10 fee for the whole month. Like unlimited childcare for this one $10 fee. And I've thought, could I just like work in the corner of the gym?
Yes, you could.
And I don't think I will bring myself to, there's not even a lobby. Like I would be in the room with all of the machines, you know, but I have thought, what can I do where I look like I'm kind of working out and maybe I'm moving, I'm on a machine or something, but I'm actually getting stuff done.
I feel I have since my son was born, like I either have to be working or caring for my child until my child is unconscious. And then maybe I'm working. So gym time feels like it doesn't fall in either of those categories unless I can also like be productive. So I brought my laptop. It doesn't work. But I definitely like maybe respond to emails or like review audio, or I'll like really intently focus on a project. Like I'll be like, you can't let your mind wander, Kate. Your mind has to be creating something. I don't know. It's absurd. And like the opposite of creativity 100% is when you create restrictions and rules and pressure and anxiety around it.
I don't know if it's the opposite of that, but one thing that I find that is unexpected that I didn't think would happen. So I'm a nonfiction writer. I've always done nonfiction, like storytelling and memoir, but I've always wanted to write fiction and I've always been too chicken to until now. And I think it's like two things. Firstly, having given birth, I suddenly don't care about all this stuff I used to get. Like before I was like, oh no, I'm so intimidated. Now I'm like, I gave birth, for God's sake, you know, I can do whatever the hell I want. So that's one thing. But the other thing is I feel like this certain part of my brain that is kind of controlling and that has always stopped me from, so it's always been like, oh, you won't write something good enough, or, you know, make a plan, make a really detailed structure. And then I give up before I start. But now since having the baby, and I think it's got to do with like a lack of sleep and the fact that I have a lot of downtime. So there's a lot of time, and I'm sure that you two have this as well, where you're just kind of sitting there and there's a baby doing something like knocking books over or something, and you're not required to do anything but sit there. And during that time, I feel quite creative and I get ideas. And maybe it's because of the lack of sleep as well, I'm a little bit off my guard and I feel like I let more things in. So in a way, I feel more creative being in this kind of fuzzy state than maybe I would be if I was functioning at my top. You know, like my subconscious plays a larger part, I think, in my life now.
That's fascinating.
I feel that. I think what frustrates me is that then I don't have the discipline to record it. Like I need, you know, like I thought like with the early kid, I was like, I wish I had a plug I could put into my brain because I'm having like thoughts like that. You know, you're losing your editor, you're hormonal, you're like feeling feelings you've never felt before. You're in this new terrain. But then like by the time I got in front of a computer, I was like, I can barely touch fingers to something. Like maybe I should be audio recording this whole thing and like making some audio journal, and maybe that's what it is. But because because that was it. I was like, oh God, that's a thought that will never be felt again.
There are those, if you do record audio, there are those really good transcription programs now as well. So they, you don't even have to type it out. You could just have it and then go back to it.
Do you use one like that? How do you get the ideas down?
No, I write them. I'll send like a text message to myself or a draft email or something. I also spend a lot of time on my phone while I'm caregiving. By the way. So I'm not one of those parents who's like, my child has never seen a screen and they're 5 years old. My child spends like a lot of time with screens. So I will sometimes, ignore him for a little bit and just jot it down, or I'll just, send a text to myself or write a note or something. And it's always very, very rough, but it's kind of, and also I've been having dreams that are little bits to do with this book that I've started writing, which I also think has to do with the fact that I'm woken at times when I wouldn't ordinarily wake up. So I just jot them down, and they're not, I haven't formed them into something particularly good. But I feel like it's a good thing.
Is it fiction, the new book?
Yeah.
Wow. And does it all take place in your world, or can you tell us anything about it?
It takes place. It's something that I started thinking about when I was pregnant, and I was kind of like when I was really pregnant and I basically couldn't do anything. It was really cold and I was really pregnant and I hated everything, and I'd fallen over twice. So I was having this kind of like really, really shitty time. So the book is like everything that I couldn't have at the time. So it's set on like a tropical island, and there's lots of sex, and there's lots of like all this stuff that I was like thinking about a lot, but that was so divorced from my life at the time. So there's all this kind of intrigue and drama and people doing all this cool stuff and making like intuitive decisions, and so it's kind of like a fun romp. It's not really what I particularly would have thought that I would write, but it's definitely a kind of fantasy, not genre fantasy, but like the type of fantasies that I was having while I was pregnant, and then continued to have when I was just staring at my baby and not going anywhere. So, people with like lots of different relationships and all that kind of stuff.
What is a day in your life like in this? Yeah,
so in the morning, it's a pretty slow kind of start to the day, and then he naps at some point in the morning. We don't have a schedule, so he naps like anywhere from between like starting at 9 or 11 or 12 sometimes. And then after that, we go to the Y, as I mentioned. And then at the Y, I usually go to the gym and then do something on my computer. Then we will have lunch. Then he will have another nap, during which I do administrative household things or a little bit of work if I can. Then he wakes up and we walk the dogs together, because that's an extra challenge that we have. Then we walk the dogs, and then that's about it. And then Michael comes home from work and we start all over again the next day. I have my neighbor babysits him one day a week and one evening a week when I also work, and Michael takes him to work one day a week.
And is he in bed now? Does he go to bed?
Oh, no.
No, he's late.
Not in bed now. He's in another room being wild. I think we may have made a mistake. I feel like I impose too many. I can get stressed and anxious. So I was like, instead of having a schedule, I'm just going to let it run free. And so, I don't know if that was the best decision. But yes, he is up when he wants to be, and he still wakes up at night to feed, not from me, thank God, but from a bottle. We stopped. I haven't been breastfeeding him. He stopped when he was about 6 months, and I think that's also a massive difference. That's made a big difference, and it's sad to say, but I feel like breastfeeding is such a hindrance. It's such a big thing to have to to deal with, and so many of my friends do it. I just didn't have much milk, so we always did half formula, half breastfeeding. But yeah, since I stopped, I've been a lot freer as well.
Yeah. I'm still nursing. My daughter's a year, and Fritzy nursed for 19 months. So I've been feeding children with my body for 4 years, like with pregnancy and nursing. I had like a 2-month break between my son weaning and getting pregnant with my daughter. And I 100% agree. Like, I'm at a point right now, like, as I said, I was in Lisbon by myself. I had a day by myself, and I was hauling it through Lisbon, carrying a breast pump, secretly pumping in hotel bathroom. I only pumped once or twice. But I was like, Kate, you're doing this to yourself. Like, she won't take a bottle when I'm gone. She does not do any of it. It's truly like, but she's obsessed with nursing when I'm around. But it is completely of my own doing, and it is a huge, huge part of my everyday. Or not, I wouldn't say it was much huger before, but like, yeah, it completely, if I'm home and I'm working, I'm the one that like puts her down for naps, because like it makes more sense that I would. I have to think about having a breast pump with me all of the time, the whole thing. Wow. I think it's a wonderful thing, but I'm certainly cognizant of the fact that it is something that I have chosen that has added extra everything to my day to day.
Yeah. And it takes up a lot of time. And I remember when I was pumping, it was pretty draining and depressing, like draining in several senses of the word, but it felt like I didn't have much energy after it.
Yeah. Well, I get like spikes of hunger, but yeah, you're tired. When Iris was first born, my daughter, my second kid, she nursed a lot, and I got a vitamin deficiency, which my doctors diagnosed me with. But I went in and they were like, how are you feeling? And I was like, well, sometimes I have blurred vision. And like I was like being completely depleted and like sort of destroyed by it. But I wasn't like, I went in for a checkup. I didn't go in for that. Like, I was just like, well, I guess, I don't know, maybe I'm doing like some sort of an intervention on myself as I talk about it, because it is sort of crazy.
When my baby was 5 months old, we went to Sydney Writers Festival. We went to Australia, and my friend who has almost 2-year-old was there, but her baby wasn't. So she was going to pump and dump. And the most that I've ever managed to get is like 2 ounces or something from pumping. And she had just this like massive thing. And I was like, no. And she didn't throw it out, and my baby drank it. And people were like, that's a weird thing to do. But actually it was a great, like she was throwing away like perfectly good milk. And so that was like a time when Leon actually got heaps of breast milk. It happened in his life. But that was kind of cool that we worked it out amongst ourselves.
I'm curious, you were talking about how so you talked about how you had this idea for a book while you were pregnant, and how you have these creative ideas now when you're in this fuzzy state, and it's like kind of strangely liberating. Are there other ways that your creativity has changed since having Leon?
I think I'm more ballsy in a way. So I think that I always saw myself, and this is maybe the becoming a mother aspect of it. I think I've always been the kind of good kid at school who always wants to get good grades and doesn't want to upset anyone, and in a way that's really hindered me previously. And I always think that other people are better than me in some way, or, to be respected, or, whenever I meet someone, I'm like, wow, and that's kind of been my way in the past. And I also started working when I was quite young in my writing work, and people would always comment, that I was young, and now I am no longer young, and also just had a baby, and suddenly I feel like I've switched. So that's no longer my kind of way of operating. So in some ways I've become more courageous, where I feel some things that previously I might have been like, oh, I don't think I can do that. I think, oh, yes, I can. And maybe people who I obviously there are still people who I admire and who are much more talented than me, but I don't think anymore, I don't feel as intimidated out of doing things anymore. But yeah, so I think I've become creatively liberated in some ways, because I feel more like an adult or a grown, or I don't know, something where I am no longer young one coming up. And I think that might have to do with the kind of disastrous act of giving birth that in some ways you feel like you've aged 10 years after doing it, or I certainly did, where it was very rough. And I came out of it thinking like, I've seen some shit. I've been through one, and I've earned my stripes in a way. And I know that many people have given birth as well, but it made me definitely feel in some ways like a more capable person in this world. And I don't think that I needed to give birth to do it. I don't think that you need to give birth to a child to, for some reason, be confident. But for me, that made a big difference.
Can you think of an example of something that you, and not to put you on the spot, but something that you have done or created, or just an idea that you've pursued that you might not have before?
Well, I think definitely the writing fiction. So I've always wanted to write fiction and kind of dabbled in it a little bit, but I wasn't trained in it. And though I am a big reader and I love reading, I've never felt that I was the person who should be writing fiction. And I have been. I've written about 50,000 words or something. So that's a big thing. And it's actually very hard to do something like that because there's no reward in sight. So I don't think it's nothing that I'm being paid for. It's nothing that I have a deadline for. It's nothing that will probably get picked up. So you need a lot of confidence to do that. And in the past, I've been thwarted by myself saying to myself, no, you should do paid work, or you should do freelance editing, or stick to what you know. And for some reason with this, I've stuck to it. And I think that's a type of confidence that I didn't have before. And even more so because I have so much less time.
Right.
So you were saying the change happened with childbirth, and then did you feel after that other significant times of change, or did parenthood feel like it shifted you as significantly, or do you think it was?
Parenthood actually made me feel really, really vulnerable. And I think it was a strange thing that happened where at the same time as I told you that I had the baby a couple of months before the book came out. And certainly after I had my baby, and I know it happens to a lot of people, I had some really weird hormonal things happening, and I felt very vulnerable. I really identified with the baby, and I think I felt in some ways very, very fragile for a while. And even though that lasted maybe 3 weeks or something after the birth, when the book came out, I kind of something got a little bit mixed up in my mind where I saw the book in a very similar way to how I saw the baby, and I felt very vulnerable once again, and I felt very upset and scared when it was coming out, and kind of like it was something, small and helpless that I had made. And essentially this is a book about my childhood, so it kind of is about me as a baby, and putting it out into the world was really terrifying because I felt like I was just sending unaccompanied a baby out, and anyone could do whatever they wanted to it. So it was a really terrifying thing to happen. So in some ways, I did feel more confident and powerful or whatever, but in some ways I think that parenthood has made me a lot more vulnerable. And of course, I have so much anxiety around being a parent, and I worry, whenever I see things on TV or whatever that are a bit disturbing, or when someone's, when there's a bad guy or something happens to someone, or, someone, anything that happens to anyone, I imagine it happening to my kid. And that's, suddenly it's like I'm double the vulnerable that I used to be, because it used to be, that I would just have to make sure that I was okay. And now I suddenly have to make sure that someone who is who knows nothing and falls on his head all the time, I have to make sure that he's okay. And that's been, really big.
Were you aware? That's so interesting about thinking of your baby in this, thinking of your book in the same way you had your baby, in this way that it sounds like you think was maybe like too vulnerable or like too invested. I don't know. I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but were you aware that you were doing that? Like, I'm thinking of my book, like what level of awareness did you have?
I think I was aware that I was freaking out to a degree that was too much. So the week before the book came out and after it came out, for a little while, I felt very bad. And I was aware of it, but there was nothing I could really do to stop it. And now when I think back on it, I think it probably is that, that I got the two a little bit mixed up, and that I had very similar feelings about my baby and my book. But also, having a baby is a goodbye to your own childhood, I think. And for me, writing this memoir, even though I am 36 years old now, I'm maybe a bit immature in that way, but I do feel like I've only just finished with my childhood, and it's a little bit sad because it's like saying goodbye to little Sofija, who I'm really fond of and who I talk a lot about and my whole book is about, and suddenly it's like it's not about her anymore. She's like someone who is now grown up and has a child of her own, and that's a little bit, confronting in some ways. But also, as like I said before, it's empowering in some ways because it allows you or it allows me to be adult and confident in certain ways that I didn't used to be.
It's like you've turned into that poem, When I'm an Old Woman, I'll Wear Purple. To me, it feels like you had a baby and you were like, fuck it, I'm wearing purple.
I do not know that poem, but I would love to read it.
It's like a...
I know the poem too. I know of it, but I don't know who wrote it.
We'll put it in the liner notes, Mary.
Yeah.
Sofija, we always say that we're going to put things in, and we know podcasts don't have liners, but we always end up with a series of references that we say is for the liner notes. So we'll put the poem in the liner notes and everyone can read it. But I feel like that was your moment. Like you had a baby and you were like, bring on the purple, like bring on the feathers.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There was something very, very empowering about it.
Well, Sofija and I worked on Sofija's moth story. Our babies are 2 months apart and we were like massively pregnant. Telling the story and then ending it on a contemplation of you having a child, which I think may have been informed by the very, specific time in our lives that we were. But we do have a beautiful picture of us the night that Sofija told her story with our like huge bellies. I'm so proud of you for making it onto the stage.
Weren't you?
I was due
like the next day or something.
No, I was due like that week though. Like there was a question of whether I would make the show and I was like, by that time my work is done. Like it's, but then we were just backstage eating all of the cheese. Like I do remember that we were like, and that's the other thing that's great that maybe gets you comfortable taking up space. Like your vulnerability is so visible when you're hugely pregnant that everyone, so I was like, I'm the pregnant lady. Like, I'm not going to be embarrassed about the fact that I ate this entire triangle of brie because you all know that there's another baby inside of me and maybe that baby needs it or something. But you get a little training.
What was the story?
It was a story about me as a child and my mother trying to make me feel better about our move from Yugoslavia to Australia. And we're at Singapore airport and she buys me this very special little toy worm, like a fuzzy worm thing. And Kate and I had a really emotional time. We were both sort of, the hormones were really active and we were both about to give birth and thinking a lot about motherhood and crying. And I remember before I told the story, we were like, will anyone else think this is good apart from us? Like, we're completely on some different wavelengths where we cry all the time about everything. Yeah. But I think other people liked it as well. It wasn't just us.
No, it was beautiful. I mean, ultimately, the story explored like her mother desperately buys her this worm in the airport, but that like sort of desire you have as a parent, like the way you remember your parents doing things as a kid and the way as a parent you now realize what was going on with them, that her mother had this vulnerable kid that she was taking from her home and would do anything to sort of like protect her and love her and make her feel okay. And like, you don't realize that as a kid, you just think your mom is being a mom. But then as a parent, you realize that there's just this bigger, beautiful maternal thing going on. So obviously that theme sort of, cut deep with us at that moment.
Right.
I think it was actually a good thing to do a month before giving birth or whenever it was. I think it was, because it made me think about a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Has your mom heard the story?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, she has. Yeah, my mum
Is she still in Australia?
My mum features quite heavily in a lot of stuff that I write. So in the memoir, she features pretty heavily as well, and she enjoys that, I think.
Mary, what have we not asked Sofija yet that we usually ask?
If there were a piece of advice you wanted to give your pre-parent self about what the future would be like, can you think of what you might say?
I think I would definitely tell myself that everything passes. So I had a really hard time, the actual birth and then the getting over the birth. And it seemed like it would take forever to heal and to become emotionally kind of stable again. And you just do. I think it's, I think that's what I would tell myself. And I think it felt like such a big change and I was so upset. There's all these people, I hate it when people say, and I wonder if this has happened to you as well, but there's those people and they're parents, so they should know better, but they say things to you like when you're pregnant, they say like, enjoy going to the cinema because you'll never go again. Like, that book because you'll never read again. It's such a horrible, depressing thing to say. And also it's just not true. And that was something really nice. I, the author Meg Wolitzer, I saw her somewhere and her book was about to come out and I was heavily pregnant and I said that I was looking forward to reading it. And she said, hey, you know what? People are probably telling you won't have time to read once you have a baby, but you will. Just don't worry about it. And it was such a meaningful and nice thing. And I actually ended up reading her book while I was pumping milk in the middle of the night. But it's just,
Which one?
You get to be yourself. The one that came out recently, The Female Persuasion.
I also read that while I was breastfeeding and pumping.
It's a good one.
I read so much I read more after having a baby than I did in like any of the years.
Same. And now
before.
I go to bed early, like I go to bed whenever between the time of 8 and 1 in the morning, whatever my kid goes to bed. But I still, I read. And I think that it's like, if you say you'll never read again, that's if you weren't that interested in books anyway, but you end up choosing, you end up just kind of, you can still have your identity. I think that was one thing that I really feared and one thing that was really big for me, that when I had the baby, I suddenly wondered whether I was still myself anymore. And even though you don't necessarily feel like yourself at the beginning, I think you do come back to it. And if you are someone who books mean a lot to them or films mean a lot to them, like me, and it's incredibly hurtful when someone says that part of your life is over, I think I would say to myself and to other people who are like me, don't worry about it. You will things will go back. And just like, you go to the dentist and you're not the same anymore, it's a little bit the same. So you have a kid, you're not the same anymore, but as well.
I love the comparison of having a kid to going to the dentist and leaving.
It make me feel, I think, I can't remember, maybe my mum said that to me because I was like, but I will never be the same. She's like, yeah, well, you're never the same. Like every day you're not the same anyway. Like things happen and yes, you have a kid, but you're still the same person who's, now you have a kid. So just get over it. I think. Yeah.
I was also very relieved to find that I'm reading so much. And I was also having the identity struggle, but I was like, at the very least, I have so much time to read. And that in itself was like one little piece that challenged that idea that I was like not going to be a person apart from being a mother once I had a baby.
Yeah. The Indonesia trip that I went on that we spoke about, I felt really guilty going on the trip to begin with. I was like, oh no, what am I doing? And will he remember me when I come back? Is this a really formative week for him? And I just don't know it. Well, actually it was because he started walking, but I remember thinking that. And then I got 11 hours sleep. I swam in the pool. I hung out and got drunk with other writers. And I came back and it was like, oh, yeah, that's who I am. You know, it was a reminder of who I was. And it's not like I wasn't going to go back to being a mother. You know, it just was something that I feel like I needed a little bit to remind me. Yeah, of myself and things that are important to me other than motherhood, which is extremely important as well.
I love that.
I went away to a wellness retreat 2 weekends ago. I was working, but I also was wellnessing. And I, at one point, did aerial yoga meditation and like was hanging upside down from silks. And I sent my dad a photo and my dad was like, he was being goofy, but also I think heartfelt. He said, you know, I only ever saw my mother in a house coat. And he said, your son is going to see this photo. And like, that's what you were doing. Like he sees you as a human being. He sees you as a vibrant person, you know.
I think it's so lovely. And it's so true as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
We took Leon to every show that I hosted from when he was born until he was banned, which was when he was about 6 months old and he started being really loud. But I love he you know, he would just sit there and he would respond to my voice. Like if I was on stage, he would kind of like his ears would perk up and he enjoyed, you know, when people played music and he never woke up when people applauded and it was always loud and, you know, and I like that. Like I like him to think that, yeah, his mother does stuff apart from being his mother as well.
Yeah, I showed Fritzy a video. I had someone video when I was hosting a show the other day and it would like pans through the crowd and then up to me on stage because he's not been to a live event of mine because I've always made my kids go to bed very early. And it was really cool to see his face, to see like, oh, this is like something I'm adjacently familiar with, like this idea of live performance, but that's my mom. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much, Sofija, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really, really fun to chat to you.
It was awesome having you.
Coming up next.
Me having control over my body was like a big part of my journey to like being the artist that I consider myself today. And so losing that control was like just terrifying.
Next episode, aerialist and choreographer, Elena Delgado.
Get creative. Go to imstillherepodcast.com to find links where you can rate, review, and subscribe.
I'm still here.